Greetings, citizens of YouTube. So I've got some friends here who are feeling a little black-pilled and hopeless, I suppose. So this video here is for my brother and sister Gen Xers and my beloved millennials and anybody who's just feeling black-pilled. One of the ancient Greek dramatists, either Euripides or Sophocles or one of those guys, said the quote, there's joy in hardship heard about. In other words, what can make you feel better than hearing somebody else's fucked up story of misfortune? I think that's what makes stories such a good form of escapism. So I have a story to tell. And you may like it, you may not. You may just think it's boring. It's just a story I like a lot, and I think it's made better for the fact that it's true. So it begins in the city of Tehran, which is the present-day capital of Iran. Although at the time our story takes place, the country was still known as Persia, and this would have been the turn of the 19th century. So maybe 1817, 1818, something like that. A man was born into wealth and privilege in an aristocratic, wealthy family. And from an early age, he had a reputation for kindness and generosity, earning himself the nickname Father of the Poor. Well, a Persian merchant began preaching that that a prophet would come similar to Jesus or Muhammad. And this merchant called himself the Bab, which means the gate. And he amassed quite a number of followers. You can sort of think of him as like a John the Baptist figure, you know. And our father of the poor, who at the time I suppose would have been in his late 20s, early 30s, more like late 20s, I suppose, heard the Bab's message and became one of his followers. In fact, he became his foremost disciple. Also, it was somewhere around this time that he met the woman of his dreams, married, and had 3 sons. Well, unsurprisingly, the Persian authorities weren't too happy about a new religious movement springing up on their turf. So they arrested all of the Bab's followers, known as Babis. And the father of the poor, he was arrested too. Now, as for his real name, it is known, but I can't remember it. It's very long and it's very Persian. So I'll have to stick with honorific titles. Well, he was arrested and he was separated from his family. And he was thrown into a Persian prison, which really was more like a dungeon. It was really more like what Central Asian cultures would refer to as a zindan, or the French would call an oubliette. So we're talking 3 stories underground, completely dark, no light, and he had to wear a chain that weighed 100 pounds, which cut so deeply into his flesh that he bore the scars of it for the rest of his life. Well, eventually, under circumstances that I'm not entirely clear on, he did secure his release. He was released from that dungeon. He took his family and went into exile in Baghdad. And it was there that he revealed that he was the Messiah. He was the prophet of which the Bab had predicted, and he took for himself the name Bahwala, which means the glory of God. He claimed to be the fulfillment, the eschatological fulfillment of all the Abrahamic faiths. Um, Judaism, Christianity, and both Shia and Sunni Islam. So for those of us who are Christians, he would have claimed to have been the second coming of Christ. Now, do I believe that this man was the second coming of Christ? Clearly, I can't believe that since the world didn't end. Um, but do I consider that he was some sort of cult leader? Frankly, no. He doesn't meet my test for what a cult leader is. I think of a cult leader as someone who manipulates and takes advantage of the believers of the faith that they preach in order to secure material comfort for themselves. So a cult leader is somebody who lives in luxury and their servants wait on their every whim and desire. Um, you won't find a cult leader up on a cross because that isn't the name of the game. It's about exploitation. I certainly consider that he was perhaps not the second coming of Christ, but certainly certainly some kind of prophet or saint. Um, Definitely someone sent by God. I believe that. Well, after living in Baghdad for a while, the Ottoman authorities summoned Bahwallah and his family to, where would this have been at the time? Um, I guess it at the time it would have been called Palestine. So this was before Israel existed. And Baha'u'llah was imprisoned once again in the prison city of Akka, known to the Crusaders as Acre, which is in northern Israel. And the prison that he was placed in, um, I've seen photographs of it. It looks like sort of like a medieval fortress. I wouldn't call it a castle by any means. It's a fortified, a citadel, a Kremlin, you know. And the conditions were so abhorrent that it was said by locals that a bird flying over this prison would drop dead from the stench. No bathroom facilities, human excrement on the walls, people dying of dysentery. His eldest son was imprisoned there as well. Well, eventually, under circumstances that once again I don't fully understand, um, he was released from that fortress, but had to remain in the prison city of Akka for the rest of his life, sort of under house arrest conditions, should we say? And he did most of his writing in those years, writing the religious texts of the Baha'i faith. Well, his son, Abdul Baha, remained imprisoned in that fortress. Abdul Baha would translate to something like a servant of glory. And he remained imprisoned there for 20 years, about 2 decades. before he was eventually freed by the Young Turks. Of course, I'm not referring to Cenk Uygur and Anna Kasparian, but the Young Turks Revolution in Turkey in 1908. He was finally set free, and he became the leader of the Baha'i faith and traveled the world, including a trip to the United States where he met a young Khalil Gibran. This would have been about in 1920, 1921 or so, which inspired Gibran to write his literary cult classic, The Prophet, which became so popular among the counterculture movement of the 1960s. And he lived to a ripe old age. The reason that I like this story so much is that if we're to imagine Abdul Baha in that prison in Akka, being held on the authority of the Ottoman Empire, which historically had ruled the world for quite a while, and there was certainly no reason to expect that the empire would ever change. Abdul Baha certainly had no logical reason to expect that he wouldn't die in that prison cell. There was no reason to believe that he would ever be released. But then a revolution came. And I think one reason that I like prison stories so much, all prison stories, not just this one, is that prison is a microcosm for life itself. It's like the world in small. It's a metaphor. Because in one shape or form or another, we're all prisoners. Either prisoners of our circumstances or prisoners of our own minds, our own insecurity. At the very least, prisoners of our flesh. And I think what I like so much about that story is that it sort of illustrates how, excuse me here, getting the text. It illustrates how any time, for any reason, everything can suddenly change. There's always the possibility of change. That's what I wrote in the letter that I sent to Chelsea Manning when she was still in prison. Yeah, I'll go ahead and put a link to that video down below for those who haven't seen it. But I wrote to Chelsea Manning after she had made one of her suicide attempts in prison, and essentially the letter TLDR, it says, don't be so hasty about killing yourself, and you could be released tomorrow. You never know. The United States might not stand forever in its current form. And I don't know if Chelsea Manning ever got the chance to read that letter because she was released about 2 weeks after I mailed it. So I just wanted to tell that little story. I don't know if it'll make anybody feel better. I think it's a good story. I think that the best thing about it is that it's true. Like none of this is a fairy tale. There are photographs of Baha'u'llah. He was a real man. Abdul Baha was a real man. And I think it's one of those great stories of the resilience of the human spirit, and how people can well to use a corny cliche, the way that tough times don't last, but tough people do, right? So I just wanted to share that with you guys. So anyway, keep it fake.